All right, man. We are back for another episode, and man, I'll tell you what, we have an extremely important man from Nashville, Tennessee, in the studio.
We have a
with us today.
repairman legend.
A repairman legend, and
that's what we should call him.
Excited to meet Joe Glaser.
Yep,
so,
Joe, welcome.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, welcome to the show. So, I've heard a lot about you over the years, but this is my first time being able to meet you in person, and man, thank you for coming in, man. This means a lot to us.
Yeah. Well, we would like to start out by a little bit of your history. We have a lot of people watching and listening that do not live in the Nashville area. The guys in the Nashville area know about you. Everybody here knows about you if you're in the guitar industry, but people watching and listening may not know who you are. I think you have an amazing history, and I would like to hear some of it. So if you could start off a little bit about yourself, and then we'll kind of slowly get into how you got into guitar repair. That'd be great. But talk about guitars and what got you excited about guitars and what got you in this business.
Yeah, start from the beginning.
Yeah. I mean, the beginning is that I was lucky to be born in this country.
Yeah.
My parents were physicians. They were first generation educated. I mean, everybody's educated, but they went to college and medical school, and they valued education extremely highly. I grew up. I was the middle kid, so the black sheep, and I got to be the disappointment in the family.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, you probably liked crazy things like rock and roll and stuff like that. I don't know.
Well, some of my mother's family were artists. They were Greek, and they were inventors and artists, and that one way or another, if there is such a thing as DNA and inheriting tendencies, that may be where that came from. But from fairly early on, I was interested in how things worked. Built the little Heathkit radio, that kind of thing. Lit fires in the backyard, all the things that either make you go into designing weapons or burning buildings down. I got interested in music. I mean, I took piano lessons as a little kid, and I wanted to be able to play piano, but I did not want to have to sit there and read music and play Clair de Lune or whatever it was that the first thing they teach you is. So I kind of took about a few months of piano lessons and gave up on that, but had the musician bug.
Yeah. And
then as a little kid, my parents would go to a lot of parties because they were my dad was gregarious, met everybody, connected everybody with everybody, and so his day didn't stop at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock. And we were living in Denver at the time, and they went out to dinner, and the babysitter took the radio, the transistor radio.
Yeah.
And put on some station and got the Colorado Jamboree, and it was like, here's pretty Miss so-and-so to sing. And in the background, somebody was playing the steel guitar.
Oh.
And I was like, wow, what is that? What is that?
Yeah.
I want to know what that thing is.
I got to learn how to do that.
Yeah, whatever. It's like when you hear Jerry Douglas talk about the fact the first time he heard the dobro, it was like the finger pointed at him. This is going to be your life.
Yeah.
So I got interested in that. That was the instrument I was interested in.
Yeah.
Maybe in another family, or maybe as somebody with more self-assurance, I would have gone to my parents and said, I want to learn how to play that thing. But that was not going to happen, and I was not that kind of kid. I was way passive and really shy as a little kid. I've grown up to be at least passive-aggressive, so that's an improvement. So it wasn't until I was in high school that I actually went and found my first steel. It was a lap steel, and I started trying to learn how to play it. We were living in California in the Bay Area by that time, and there was nobody who could teach you anything. I had been playing piano. I taught myself music on the piano. My brother and I had a blues band. My brother was a gifted musician who kind of never took it seriously, was smart enough to realize that it was no way to make a living. And he was fascinated by airplanes. So from the time he was 6, he was headed to the airline industry. And he ended up as an executive at American Airlines. But he was a great musician, gifted musician, and he could play. He was a great blues piano player and a great guitar player, and the best living Albert King imitator ever.
Wow!
Wow! Yeah, he's great. Albert King. I mean, to him, Albert King hung the moon, and to me too. I think
he did.
Yeah. I think that I think he's underappreciated and not understood. But a little of that seeped into me. My brother listened to the Beach Boys, and that seeped into me slowly. Whereas he, at 8 years old, he was, laying in front of the speakers, listening, going, listen to that bass, and I couldn't even pick out the bass.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. But because I wanted to, I worked hard at it, and I eventually became an acceptable piano player, playing my own style, made up songs. Learned a lot about music from the piano because it's all laid out there. I mean, it's kind of confusing because of the black and white keys, but it's just there as clear as the math that it is and the beauty that it is. And I bought a steel and tried to learn the best I could with no real teachers and slowing down records, and played in some bands and got interested early on in essentially hip country music, which was Sleep at the Wheel, Commander Cody. When Emmylou's first record came out, I pulled over to the side of the road when I heard the song. I mean, you hear people talk about pulling over to the side of the road. I pulled over to the side of the road and went, what is this? And it was Bottle Let Me Down and James Burton playing guitar, and I turned around and went back to the record store in Town Country Music in Palo Alto and bought the record.
Really?
And then that single incident changed my trajectory. I was the worst student I was lucky to go to Stanford University, and the worst student who ever went. the most unfocused, unprepared. I mean, I'd love to go now.
That's a good school.
Yeah.
It's a good school.
Yeah.
And what I learned there was what smart really is.
Yeah.
And I learned by watching, by osmosis, how people think. I didn't learn a lot else. I finally found myself in the English department, which is the only thing I've ever been good at, is writing fiction. And that's actually...
Really?
Yeah. That's actually what I do best. But there was no living to be made. I wrote a bunch of stuff that even in a school that big, they in the English department, they quickly sussed out the 8 or 9 people who could write fiction, and everybody else was faking it. Everybody was like, Johnny's sitting at his desk trying to write a story. They just had no imagination. And I got well into my senior year before I realized I actually sold some things and realized that it was not going to. There was no chance I was going to make a living selling short stories. There was no chance. And I went and got a Silicon Valley gig in a machine shop. I was starting to work on, because I was playing in bands, I was starting to help the guitar players fix their guitars, and I started to build basically Telecaster knockoffs because I was interested in the string bending style of Clarence White and Bobby Warford, who kind of played. He played on some of the Ronstadt stuff. He distilled Clarence beautifully. He played what Clarence White played, but in the perfect essence of it. And I heard this stuff. I had never really seen the instrument that they were doing, so I just went and kind of applied part of my Showbud steel guitar mechanism to a guitar and started making string benders, primarily for the guy in the band I was playing in, Rick Eshelman.
Yeah.
And that got me into building, and I moved to Nashville on a whim and got in deeper and deeper.
Yeah.
And the next thing I know,
What
today.
what brought you to Nashville? Why Nashville?
Total misunderstanding.
Okay.
There you go.
I've had a few of those. I think that's why I'm probably here. Yeah.
The Blackbird Academy, Blackbird Studios,
Studios, yeah.
probably the best studio in the world, one of them at least. And
Is John McBride still on that?
Yeah,
Okay.
They have 40 U47 microphones. They got all the best of everything, and 12 recording suites.
Mm-hmm.
What would pass as a recording studio anywhere else, they've got 12 of them in that the whole block that they bought. The Blackbird Academy, which is a bunch of engineering students, comes through my shop every 3 months or whatever. And I think Mark Rubel, who's the professor, the teacher, the leader, who's amazing. He's an amazing producer, and so he's a great guy to be teaching this. I guess he thought that if he brought them through a repair shop, they'd see how guitar repair fit into the music business. And I don't know what maybe they thought it'd be about a 10-minute quick walkthrough, but we spend about an hour and we talk about listening, and we talk about career paths and how you get where you're going, and I kind of share with them my philosophy on customer service, which I learned from my brother. The answer is yes. What is the question? And we talk about all that kind of stuff. How to take an idea that you think would be kind of cool. I had this girlfriend who thought that she wanted to patent a carpet that would eat dirt. She said if it had enzymes in the bottom of it, it could eat dirt. And she might not have been wrong. She might have been way ahead of her time.
That's an interesting concept there.
But the fact is that if you have an idea, you can either go, yeah, that'd be cool, or you can start looking at what it takes to make it happen.
Yeah.
And it took me a while. I mean, I invented, in a way, a string bender because I had never seen the Parsons White that Gene Parsons, who was the drummer in the Byrds with Clarence White, made. I mean, it's kind of like a big screen door contraption put into a guitar. And because I'd never seen that, I made this sort of miniaturized precision thing. And so I had made things, but it took a while to realize that no matter where you are, you can do something that should exist in the world and doesn't, and that's not trivial. In a way, string benders are trivial, but
fascinating instruments, though.
Oh, it's fascinating. But there's bigger things like, I mean, for the engineering students, it's who knows what. I mean, look at George Massenburg, who invented the flying faders. Just because he thought they should be there. And probably lots of people, because in a studio with 48 tracks or something, they used to get 6 or 8 people in there, and they'd all be manipulating these faders in the mix down. And but the point being that you can innovate from anywhere, and that you should take yourself seriously, and that there's a procedure for looking at what you want to do and go, okay, is this real? Is it nuts? Is it ahead of its time? Is it far enough ahead of its time? Because you have to be 5 years ahead of what even the wackiest person is thinking, because you want to meet the future down the road.
Sure. Yeah.
So we kind of cover these principles. We talk about this. We talk about my other fascination. When people go, you went to Stanford? I go, yeah. They go, what'd you major in? I go, reverse psychology. And they go, oh, yeah. And about a third of them laugh and realize it's a joke.
Yeah, really.
The other ones go, so that's...
Wait a second.
Remind me, but it's a big thing in life, managing expectation.
Yeah.
Telling people, particularly working in the music business, where there are a lot of artists. We were talking about before the tape was rolling about working with the fact that I worked with Junior Brown yesterday. Yeah. Junior Brown is an eccentric. He's a perfect example of this. Nobody in their right mind would say, why don't we put a guitar neck on a lap steel, and I'll learn to play the thing, and I'll learn to play a steel solo and a guitar solo between tunes while I'm singing. This just couldn't happen. But he decided to do it.
He did it.
And he's a master. And he's got his own ideas. And if you want to, his great red Git steel got stolen and still hasn't been found. who knows where it is, by the way, because nobody can play this except Junior.
Yeah.
And sooner or later,
It'll pop up.
it'll pop up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can't sell it though. You'll get caught.
You can't sell it, and so you could saw it in half. We were joking about the fact they could saw it in half and sell it as a lap steel.
Yeah.
But Junior's he's got a strong idea, and every artist is like this. Every great artist is like this, and you can't, if they come to you and say, this isn't what he did, but if they come to you and say, listen, I play really hard, but I want the action a lot lower because it can be done. You can't say, no, that's not possible. Physics doesn't allow that. And guitars are first controlled by physics and then second controlled by the player. And you have to stay within both realms. What's going to make the player happy? What's going to make the string happy? I mean, with the whole PLEK, thing, when I go out and teach people about the PLEK, I go, listen, you make the string happy, you're going to make the guitar happy, you're going to make the player happy, you're going to make the repairman happy, the world's going to be happy.
Yeah.
And it goes in that order. It doesn't go the other way. So you can't just say to an artist, no, you're wrong. You can say, yeah, we're going to get there. And then you kind of steer through the exact opposite thing in such a way that they think that it was their idea in the first place.
That sounds like everyday life.
It is. And it's
There's where that psychology major comes back, you know.
That's the reverse psychology.
Yeah.
And I had this wonderful intern last year, Chinese girl, avant-garde banjo player, and she was educated in the U.S., but she was born in China. So the gift of anybody who's in their second language is that they listen to that second language. And if you say something like, he was out of his head, they picture out of your head, whereas we've grown up saying this. We don't think anything about it.
It's literal to them.
Yeah, and that's what made Bob Dylan so great, is that he took every sentence apart, or any poet, but he was the master of listening at the words. Anyway, she said to me after she'd worked there a while, she goes, you do this thing with people, you go, yeah, that's not how it works. And I realized that this is the essence of it, that you present the solution first. You go, yes, we're gonna make you happy.
Yeah.
And there are going to be some steps, and I'm going to explain them to you so that you understand. And if we have to explain them 4 times, if you don't like them, we don't have to do things right. No is always a good answer.
Yeah.
You can say, I don't want to these frets are worn out, this guitar's backbowed, I don't want to change anything. So one of our principles is, that no is a perfectly good answer. But if you want to change something, these are the recommendations, and we're going to do one thing at a time. I mean, these are like, I could write this stuff on the wall. There's like 40 things. Do one thing at a time, But here's what we're going to do. We're going to make it reversible. We're going to check each step, and if it's not an improvement, we're going to go back to where it was and try something else. And so that's kind of the whole thing that I try to teach my guys. When I go out and do consulting, or I do training in other shops, I try to impart to them. And when the engineers from the Blackbird Academy come through, instead of talking about here's how you change strings, what we're really talking about is those principles that go across any industry.
Yeah.
And so
much more valuable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
well, it is more valuable, and they're it's funny because some of them are taking notes, but one of the interesting things we do is we talk about music, and I go, you guys, of course, if you think about someone like Charlie Christian and how he changed music, and they're like this, and you can see the people in the back row, and they're hiding behind somebody searching, and go, you guys, you know who Charlie Christian is, right? And they go, yeah, like that. I point to somebody who's doing that. I go, who was he? They go, what? He's that Christian artist in. I go, no. I go, okay, let's make it easier. Who's Benny Goodman? Charlie Christian being the first guy who really took the electric guitar. He played bebop on the electric guitar, changed the world entirely. I go, who's Benny Goodman? Because he was the clarinet playing band leader.
Okay, yeah.
You guys know this.
Yeah.
And they won't know. And I go, okay, who's Frank Sinatra? And maybe one or two people will go, I know who Frank Sinatra is. He was the guy that was married to Mia Farrow, or something.
Right,
Okay.
he was the guy in the mafia, right?
Yeah, he slept with the same woman that John Kennedy did.
Yeah.
So we get to where they finally go, who's Stevie Ray Vaughan? And then they know. Then they go, okay, Stevie Ray Vaughan, who are his influences? And they're all mystified. This last class, this one guy goes, well, Jimi Hendrix. I go, okay, that's great. Good for you. Yeah. Who was his other influence? And they can't say. I go, well, it's Albert King, who, of course, is my favorite. And you guys know who Albert King was, right? And they go, no. And they're looking at their thing. I go, okay, how can you be an engineer? How can you be a studio engineer and not know your music?
Yeah.
Because all of us that grew up prior to the internet and stuff, you had to learn your music because you couldn't just find the answer at the last second. You had to have the answer.
Yeah.
So we talk about that kind of stuff. We talk about the fact that you have to self-educate if you're going to be successful, that if you want to be successful, it's not enough to know just what you need to know.
You got to be a student of music,
And everything. And so for me, this is the long way of telling you that for I moved here when I was 26. Probably about the time I was 40, I began to realize that there were cool things that could be done and that you needed to know how to make a spring. You needed to know how analytic geometry worked so you could figure out what the curve looked like in a fingerboard. You needed to know how software worked because data was going to become important. And when the PLEK machine came along, which changed my world.
And tell those people that don't know what the PLEK machine is, briefly just tell us what that is.
Well, the PLEK machine came out of Berlin in around 2000. It's a machine that scans and works on a string instrument, strung to pitch. And the strung to pitch part is important because strings put about 80 to 160 pounds of pressure on a neck, and the neck is wood, and wood is usually wood, and it's non-uniform material, and so that tension takes a neck that it's very different under tension than without the strings on. And what the PLEK does is it does a scan, a very accurate scan, not unlike an MRI or an X-ray, and lets you see what the topography, what the shape of the fret plane, which is the surface, the top of the frets that you play on, is like, what the fingerboard's like, how much twist, how much relief, back bow, all that kind of stuff, and then lets you work on it and does it all extremely accurately, plus or minus a few thousandths of a millimeter, and a millimeter is the size of the low E on electric. So, but this is the range where it matters because that's the range at which a string starts to buzz if a fret's high. So it does all this stuff and lets you do it, and does it in a very repairman-like way, so that it does what a repairman would do. It's just way more accurate. It's got better eyes, and it remembers it all. And so I got involved in 2000 after making fun of, I'd heard about it, and I was like, I'll never use one of those things. That'll never be able to do what we do. Yeah. And then I got to see one and instantly realized what the potential was. And now everybody uses them.
Have to embrace technology sometimes.
Well, if it's an advantage.
Yeah.
I mean, I wear reading glasses.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
And in fact, I wear a magnifier. I went to get in my Uber the other day to go to the airport to go up to Sweetwater. I had my magnifier still on. These magnifying.
Did you?
And
Really?
the guy goes, "Have you been welding?"
Yeah.
And I took them off and ran them back into the shop.
Yeah.
And I used to just laugh when I saw Dan Erlewine, the great repairman Dan Erlewine, walking around with magnifiers on. But
Didn't
now I understand why.
Yeah.
Because if you can see or understand anything twice as well or 10 times as well, you can solve it 10 times as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you can make people more happy. So pretty much everybody in my shop wears them now, because the fact is, if you're doing touch-up, if you're fixing a finish and you look at it essentially under a microscope, you'll it won't be harder to work on. It won't be slower, but by the time you get it looking good under that magnification, a human looking at it with the naked eye will see no clue of what's going on.
Yeah.
And so this is really important because a lot of what we do is like what you guys do, fixing drastically damaged instruments and then painting fake grain over it so that it looks like wood, or doing something like that. And what we want is somebody to pick up the instrument and go, no, this isn't the right one because mine had a big crack here.
Yeah,
and go,
yeah.
well, it doesn't anymore.
Yeah, that's rewarding.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so talk about this. I mean, let's jump into some of the repairs that you do, because you guys are the best at doing this. So talk about that and what's some of the days that you guys go through, some of maybe the guitars that you get in, the styles, and some of the repairs that you do.
Well, so when I first moved here, I built guitars. I built essentially fake Telecasters. I mean, I was imitating the Fender Telecaster because in the late 70s, early 80s, that was not the time when Fender was doing the most memorable work ever. And so the door was open to make guitars that people actually wanted to pick up. And because it could be a vehicle for the string bending mechanism that I was making, I made guitars like that. And also that gave me the ability to work with up-and-coming artists, guys like Brent Mason and Ricky Skaggs and people like that, who went on when they made their career, my career kind of rode along with it. So I built for a while, and at a certain point, all those guys got to be pretty successful. And instead of getting to build one purple guitar for Ricky and then one such and such for somebody else, I started getting these orders for 8 or 10.
So you were building guitars and putting them out there, and artists just kind of happen to stumble across them. I mean, it seems like, most people, work an entire lifetime when it seemed like you just achieved within a short amount of time. So is there something you were doing that people were seeking out at that point?
Yeah, when I first moved here, there was a shop called the Pick and Parlor, which had been started by George Gruen, the guy who essentially invented the vintage instrument market, or vintage guitar market. Tut Taylor, who was a dobro player and a kind of a prominent guy in the business, and Randy Wood, who was one of the early real instrument repair guys. And they started this place that was originally called GTR, which was one of their initials, and then became the Pick and Parlor. It was on 2nd Avenue. And it had a bunch of great young repair guys in it. Jerry Jones, who later went on to do the Neptune line and the Jerry Jones guitars. Okay. Danny Farrington, who built Art guitars, and he built Farrington, Ferrington. There's a book about him. He's a fascinating builder. He built instruments that weren't necessary. Up close, they looked like he built very fast. He did not care what something looked like up close. He cared what it looked like from 6 or 8 feet and what the concept was. And so, anyway, there were a bunch of people like that. Dave Petchelot, who was one of the inventors of the fine-tuning locking vibrato and built the little Les Pauls that Van Halen used. There were maybe 8 guys up there, all really talented. I wanted to work there. Coley Coleman owned it, and he was going out of business but hadn't told anybody. And so I'd go in there and ask him for a job, and he'd go, "Yeah, I don't think so." And I took it personally, but it was actually one of the luckiest things possible because I had to go figure out for myself how truss rods worked and some of the things that I was hoping to learn from those guys. So I built for a while, and what I learned from Danny Farrington, who worked up there, was that if you wanted he invented this thing. The path to success for a luthier, which is figure out who you want to work for and then go to a sound check when they're playing someplace and show them something that you think is like what they want, but not what they want. And they'll play it and they'll go, this is cool, but this isn't for me. And then you go, well, what? How so?
Yeah.
And you set the hook. I mean, and I don't know if he did this intentionally, but this is the message I got. And the key parts were go sound check, because if you go to them after the show, they're either going to be right out of there or they're dealing with the in those days the person who was bringing the drugs or the bringing the whatever escapade, the party. But if at sound check they're sitting around waiting for stuff to happen, they're bored, they're open, they're just another person. And and show them something. So I learned this from watching him, and I picked out the people whose music I really liked, Ricky Skaggs being one of them. And I through Bruce Boughton, who was playing steel with him at the time, I said, I'd like to meet Ricky. I was building electric mandolins, little Telecaster-shaped electric mandolins, and I said, I'd like to meet Ricky, because I knew he played mandolin but not electric, and he was starting to he had a great electric band. And so I met him, and I said, have you ever thought about electric mandolin? I loaned him this thing I had. It was just a copy of a Fender electric mandolin. He goes, you know what I'd really like? I'd really like a 5-string mandolin, and if it maybe like a Telecaster. And it's like, ding, ding, ding.
Yeah.
There it was.
You're in. Yeah.
And so I made this thing, and he played it, and people saw it, and they ordered them. And so I did that with a series of people who I really liked, whose music I liked. And to do it successfully, you kind of have to be ahead of everybody else.
Yeah.
You have to, I started working with Brent Mason before everybody, and his brother saw him as the most amazing guitar player. And you have to catch them on the way up, because once they're up there, a small independent, they're just gonna want Fender to do something for them, or Gibson. So I built until I got too many repeat orders, and I decided I'm sick of that. And then I started doing repair, because instead of having to do the same thing every day, you do something new every day. To answer your question, that's all over the place as to what it is. And it all involves problem solving, which is what I like the most.
Interesting.
And I'm a pretty good technician. I can, my hands are pretty steady. I can shape a neck nicely. I can make a nice looking nut, but I'm not the best at anything, but I'm a good problem solver.
Yeah.
And so in my shop, we specialize, and whoever's the best at something, that's what they end up doing.
Yeah.
And then I kind of go around. I liken it to, this is going to sound egotistical, but it's not. Sometimes if you go to a park, you'll see one guy playing chess against 54 other people. There'll be 54 little tables, and then there's the guy who's the guy, and he'll walk around, he'll spend about 8 seconds looking at something and make his move, and then go to the next table. And then these other people sit there and they ponder for 40 minutes what their next move is, and it's just about the time it takes him to come around. That's sort of what I do. I go around the shop and go, how are you thinking about doing this?
Yeah.
And if they say, I don't know, I go, well, give me 3 ideas. And they'll give me their 3 ideas. I go, which one's the best? And they'll kind of look at me like, like the RCA dog, like, what are you thinking? And like, okay, is that the final idea? I'll go, I'm thinking of something else. What is it? And then they'll go back and they'll look at it and go, you're thinking that take a guitar where the truss rod rattles, for instance. What we do is we pop an inlay or a fret, drill a tiny hole down till you get to the truss rod, and then put silicon rubber, and then whatever drill size you use, flip the drill over, take silicon rubber and pump it in with the back end of the drill bit, and it'll go in and fill the truss rod slot. It never hardens, so it'll kill the vibration, but
you can still adjust it.
Yeah. And I've been doing that since I actually did all the guitar work in the early 80s or something. But it's an example of something where there was a certain solution. But I'll ask them, and they'll go, well, you're thinking, pop the inlay or whatever, whatever it is. And okay, you could have gotten there. Ask yourself these questions. And so one of the things that we do is we sort of play this game of the internal dialogue. And I do this with myself. If I'm trying to figure out wiring or how to chop down a tree at my house or something, I'll go, okay, what are 3 ways of doing this? What am I not thinking of? What is the smarter guy already looking at? And almost invariably, you end up with the solution, and it helps you solve this stuff. So this is what I do at the shop.
Yeah.
I also do repair. I do the things that nobody else wants to do. I do the things where they've told the customer, no, we don't do that. And I go, wait, I'll do it. Because it's important never to say no unless something's really a stupid idea, or somebody is one of those people that you're going to regret working for the rest of your life. Yeah. And there are.
Man. And those exist.
Huh? They exist. We fired 4 or 5 people over time.
Yeah, sure.
Customers.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
So on a given day, like I was telling you guys before we started, Junior Brown came into town to play, and Sunday, because he's an old friend of mine, I went down Sunday to help him with his Git Steel. And it's made by Michael Stevens, who's he was one of the first class of Fender master builders. So he's top notch, but he had to finish this thing in a tremendous hurry because Junior's other Git Steel had been stolen. And we were going through the neck, and Junior says, it just doesn't feel, it just doesn't, and using hand language, it's like, like, okay, I speak hand language. But what we ended up doing is going through what setup is in the correct order that you really have to go through it. And you guys got a lot of setup guys, and I presume that somebody arranged the protocol, the procedure. You do this first, then you do this, you do this, because if you don't do them in that order, you're kind of cutting legs off an 8-leg table in the wrong order, and you're never going to get it to stabilize. We get a lot of that stuff. We get a lot of work. We get a tremendous amount of work where people come in to get fret work done because they know we have a Pluck machine, and they know that we treat every customer as a different player. Most shops I've ever been to have a one-size-fits-all deal. There's a setup, and it's the way the guy who runs the shop likes it. If you don't like it, you go somewhere else. Yeah. We definitely feel like every player has their own preferences, because they do.
Sure. Yeah, oh, absolutely.
We don't not take customers, but because we don't advertise, we don't have a website, we focus on the pros, the studio players, the road players, and the artists. And most of them are already pretty sure of what they're looking for. Mm-hmm. And so a guy like Tommy Emmanuel, for instance, plays pretty hard but very low in he's got a certain thing he likes, a certain fret wire size he likes, and a certain every aspect of it. And he beats on his guitars. When I first started working for him, he'd come into the shop, and nicest guy on earth, and he'd come in and go, something's broken inside. I don't know how it happened.
Because he's a percussionist, tapping everything.
He played in town finally. I went down to see him at TPAC, and I saw him beating the bejesus out of his guitars. I was like, okay, I get it. Uh-huh. So we use carbon fiber and different things to do more solid reinforcement. But if you don't if you don't go see the people play, and if you don't talk to them, and you don't watch and think about what they're trying to say, you can't really help.
Got to understand where they're coming from.
So we do a lot of that. We really try. And then Joe Robinson, who's this young other Australian guitar player who came up in the Tommy Emmanuel school, and is now sort of split off. He's still in his 20s, I think.
I just heard about him. Somebody mentioned him to me today, literally this morning.
Remarkable guitar player. Incredibly hardworking, focused, despite the fact that he's kind of like a handsome guy. He could be living on his looks.
Yeah.
But he doesn't. He works as hard as somebody who has a huge scar across his face or something, that rules them out from.
He doesn't know he's good looking.
Yeah, he's just treated it like somebody who's physically disadvantaged.
Yeah.
Like when I was playing piano, I used to joke around about the fact that I was thinking about putting out my eyes so I could start playing like Ray Charles.
Yeah.
But so Joe, so you watch Joe Robinson. First he's like set it up like Tommy's, and then now there's a certain fret size he likes, and there's a certain action he likes, and now he has his own Maton model. Maton being the Australian acoustic guitar manufacturer that
Maton?
Maton.
Yeah.
And they build for a lot. The Australian players are very loyal to Maton, which is a wonderful thing.
And is that Tommy Emmanuel's? Is he associated with them?
Yes, he is.
Okay. I've seen
And
yeah.
Keith Urban plays a Maton. I mean, he can play anything he wants, and he makes sure a Maton gets in there every now and then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So these guys are good to it. But anyway, we do that. We'll do things like probably twice a week we get a guitar in where the headstock's broken off. And we used to just glue them or put splines. Spline being an implanted piece of wood actually is a weaker repair than no spline.
Is it?
We tried that. People do this thing where they put a back strap. They lay a flat piece of wood across the back of the headstock and up the neck, and that helps, but it's not roadworthy. And the people here, so about, I don't know, in the mid-'90s, I started putting fiberglass on the back, about a 4-inch wide swath around the neck. And you had to thin the neck down so that when the fiberglass was on there, that it was still
the same
level.
shape. Yeah.
And that was great, but it could break, it could tear in the worst case scenario. And then you go paint on top of it. And originally, we sunbursted everything, and then we realized that you could paint fake mahogany. So if it wasn't sunburst, you could make it look like mahogany, and you can even make it look like maple, which is a real trick, but you can do it. And when carbon fiber cloth became less expensive, we started using carbon fiber cloth, and this was probably 20 years ago. Yeah, 20 years ago. And we have this whole rig for taking it down about a 1/16 of an inch, and then Scott Holyfield, who you guys know, he's a master of this, and he lays that in, and then and carbon fiber cloth could be a handkerchief, it's so soft, but when you put it in with epoxy, it becomes incredibly stiff.
Oh yeah.
And you could forget to glue the neck together and just do that, and the neck would still never ever break.
Really?
Okay.
And we've done. You could hook it together with bubble gum, but the carbon fiber
Holds
does
it
the
together.
trick. Yeah, and we go about 2 inches up the headstock and 2 inches down the back of the neck. You don't see it. I mean, if you play and you wear through, all of a sudden there's this black cloth, and people are kind of like that. Wow, that's the coolest thing. But and if it's really worn, like we have a guitar, Rodney Crowell's, his wonderful little 30s L00 that headstock broke off. And because he's used to the feel of bare wood all the way up the neck, we're putting this carbon fiber down, and then we're putting a little bit of bare wood back over it.
Oh, wow.
So, so you do what you need
have
to do.
Really take off some material to be able to do that, huh?
Well, 1/16 of an inch.
Okay.
But it's so strong that no matter, you're not weakening. And we've done at least 2,000 of these, and we've never, ever had one come back, and we never, ever will. They don't break again. They'll break further up the neck, or they'll
Somewhere else,
run over the body, but it never breaks. So that's kind of that happens fairly regularly, but that's sort of an example of something that we do that is probably it's probably pro level. It's probably not something you'd see people doing.
No, that's pretty high tech. Yeah.
I see in YouTube where, one of my former employees went to Singapore and is working at Swee Lee, and he posts a lot. And since he'd seen this, he did the thing and posted it. And then I saw where the people that followed him post it. And so it's a style that's getting around, but it's not for beginners because it's just
sounds like a lot of work.
It's a lot of work. I mean, it ends up we charge, I think, $600 for it. We've had people bring in guitars that weren't broken yet and say, will you carbon fiber the neck because I'm going to take this on the road and I don't want it to break.
Oh,
wow,
very interesting. And it keeps the tone intact, or does it improve it? Or
I've never told anybody it's going to make their guitar sound better, but what we do here is people like the sound better because it's stiffening the neck, and it turns out that whether you do it by being lucky enough to have your truss rod tight when the neck's set the way you want, a stiffer neck almost always sounds better. I've never heard somebody tell me that a softer neck sounded better. So yeah, it improves the tone, but we don't pitch it as that because that's just
that's subjective.
Yeah. It's subjective, and it's also the kind of baloney that I don't want to be doing that.
Yeah, that's smart. Yeah.
It's like after we do a PLEK dress, which is an incredibly accurate dress, because the fret of the shapes, the shape of each fret is exactly the same. Some of them aren't flatter than others because it's being done by this cutter that's sort of the shape of the fret. People come in, they go, man, my guitar plays great. It sounds better too. And it's like, okay, you can say that. I'm not going to say that.
Yeah.
And you hear it enough to where you know it's probably true. And it's coming from these badass players, these world-class guys. But we don't go out and tell people that because it's just like, it's what I don't like about advertising.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's like that guy. Remember he passed away, the controversial guy. Roman. He used to. I remember came across one of his websites. He would say that on Gibsons, if you want them to sound better, go ahead and break the headstocks now and re-glue it so it could. That's the kind of thing, gimmicky stuff that just doesn't make any sense. But there's people out there pitching it. So
the problem with guitar repair is that we all started in a basement or our mom's garage or something. There's no formal training, though. Now there's some really good schools. There's, Musicians Institute here. The Gallup School in Michigan's an incredible school.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of good things about those guys lately.
Brian Gallup he's one of the small handful of true building repair geniuses. He's doing this very interesting software that looks at the resonant frequency of wood before it's made into a guitar top by tapping on it and determining what is the ideal thickness that a given piece of wood needs to be planed down to, so that when you use it as a guitar top, you get the sound you're after.
Interesting.
I want a 38 Martin D28 sound, or I want a finger style, and it's real stuff. It's real. I mean, I've been watching this and the violin people have known this stuff for years, but they don't tell anybody.
Yeah, DW does that with their drum shells. They tone tap it and have a system for the pitches and stuff, so they can match drum sets together, so they tonally sound the same. Yeah.
Well, he's doing this for manufacturing, so that when you get the wood in piles, before you even slice it up, you weigh the block and you calculate its cubic. It's a mass and its cubic volume, and you figure out how thick do we want this stuff to be, and it really, really works.
Wow.
But anyway, there's a bunch of schools that are good schools, and even when people go through those schools, most people who hire them untrain them and start over again. And most repair shops that I visit, which is probably 40 a year.
Wow.
Either working, because, as part of PLEK, I go do setup and training, and then I go visit a lot of places. Most of them operate on about somewhere between 25% and 75% myth.
Interesting.
Wow. Okay.
There's a lot of mist in this industry. Yeah.
And they all feel like, and I'm sure this is true of me and my shop, it certainly was at various stages in the past, they all feel like they have the one true insight. It's like churches. If you go up, we're in Nashville, right? If you drive up Franklin Road, there are 36 or 37 churches on Franklin Road.
Yeah, they're on every corner.
On just one corner.
Well, almost. And one year I went to all of them. I went one weekend to weekend. And it's interesting. It's just something to do. And I'd hang out in the inn and talk to the people, because every church you've ever been to, when a stranger comes in, they're either suspicious or they think that you might be a new member, and so they first suss you out and then they try to enlist you. And so I talk to them and I go, "What's so great about you guys? I mean, this is kind of cool." And they go, "Well,
what's so great about you?" That's a great question to ask.
Yeah.
They go, "We have the one true insight." And I go, "Wow, that's so lucky. You're so lucky." And because the people at Caddy Corner don't have it, and the people but they all feel they do.
Yeah,
they all feel it. And that's really important. It's important to feel that way. But luthiers are the same way. They all pat themselves on the back. When the PLEK came out, the resistance was tremendous, and everybody said, "No, well, we have our own way of doing it, and it's better than what the machine can do. I can do better than that." It's like, okay, bless your heart,
Yeah.
But once you take an instrument they do and scan it, you realize that either they're actually some of the time, and hopefully most of the time, which doesn't exist, as doing the same thing and as dependably, or they're shooting for that, but just not executing very well.
Okay.
Because it's physics. The string is just a manifestation of a sound wave. And so unless it's a bent string, it's going to do the same thing every time. And the shape of the fingerboard underneath the string mimics that. So for the harder, our rule is the customer determines the attack. What's your max attack? How hard do you want to hit when you hit the hardest you can? And that max attack creates the trajectory of the string, its amplitude, which creates the curve that the neck relief needs to be in. And it's just as simple as that. It's physics. And it's true of every instrument, a ukulele, a mandolin, a banjo. And players will tell you, I work for Bela Fleck and Noam Pikelny, the two great banjo players I've ever met. And both of them have said, well, Noam in particular, who's the pickiest human on earth, he goes, well, you can't use the algorithm out of that machine because I put a lot more relief in my neck and I do blah, blah, blah. This is the first time we did this. And I said, well, let's just see. And we scan it. But for his action and his light string gauge, it's exactly what the physics would predict.
Really? Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah. There are people who want a dead flat neck. There are people who play a backbowed neck because they want the rattle in the first position.
Yeah.
So people can do whatever they want, but the physics is the physics. And so you can count on that.
Yeah.
But people tend to want to think that they have some special insight, and they've told their customers that they have a special insight, and their customers tell each other that so-and-so, the guitar repair guy there, he's the one guy. He's the one true God.
He's the guy.
Yeah. And the ones who remain open-minded tend to improve, and the ones that don't tend to get stuck in whatever they figured out by the time they were 23, and then even when they're 57, they do the same thing but slower and with a shaky hand.
Yeah.
Even here, we've done some repair workshops, and we have some of our customers will come in here and they'll go through workshops, and we're just trying to help and improve people, like another just stream of income, and share information. It's just like, hey, maybe we can help improve, and we'll get people walk in and they're like, man, I've been working on guitars for 30 years. There's nothing you can teach me. And then Ian will teach them the popsicle trick about how to keep the strings off the neck, and they're like, I've never seen that before in my life. Oh my gosh, it just changed everything. And
little tricks.
Yeah, it's just. So nobody knows everything.
Yeah.
Well, and the corollary to that is in having had the opportunity to work with John Suhr, or having been friends with Paul Reed Smith for years, eventually, or any of these guys who are really the brilliant Brian Gallup, I've had a chance to hang out with them or go visit their shop, and they'll go, well, here's how we do this, here's how we do that. It's like going through Disneyland or something. It's entertaining because you see that 98% of the stuff you do the same, even though they got there completely independently.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there's always 2 or 3% where you go, did you ever think about such and such? And they go, no, is that something? And you go, yeah, that is. And then they'll sit there and they'll think about it. And later, one or two things happen. Later, they'll call you back and go, man, that was really cool. I learned that from you. Or they'll go, somewhere I learned that, I've gotten to know Ned Steinberger in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
And because Ned made carbon fiber necks with no truss rod. And I was like, Ned, you got to have a truss rod because you want a different relief for low action than you do for high action. Relief being the bow of the neck. And he was like, I don't understand. And I go, Ned, you do. And I took him to my shop and I showed him on the PLEK how it works and why it works, because it's all in graphic kind of video game quality graphics. And he was like, oh. And he's like one of the smartest human beings.
Yeah.
And later, as we got to know each other, as the shallow human being I am, I said, I hipped you to the fact that that relief needed to be adjustable, because he was designing some new guitar, and I said, "You're going to put truss rod in there." He goes, "Yeah, I think it's something that would help." And I go, I hipped you to that. And he's like, did you?
How quickly you forget.
Well, it's not that. It's the my ego is like tied in all this stuff. But the fact is that all the people who are really good have stumbled on of their own almost all the same stuff, and then all the people who aren't very good have either bought into something or made something up, and they hold to it just as tightly, but it might be wrong.
My gosh, there's a lot of wisdom right there.
Yeah.
And there are things that are wrong, and it really is. I mean, if you break it down, there's not only the physics of the way the string moves, but the neck moves too. And so you have these two interacting resonant frequencies, and a really soft neck, or a neck with a guitar with a really soft neck joint, like an SG or a Firebird. That neck will move a lot more, and so they tend to be prone to rattling because as the string's moving, no matter how perfect the frets are, the neck's moving. And if you look at it high-speed strobe, you see this, and it's. So nothing's a simple system, but nothing is hocus pocus. It's all there, and it's all
science.
It's all science. And you can do. I went to visit Hideo Kamamoto in San Jose the other day, and he wrote the first guitar repair book that was worth a dang. He and Donald Teeter did, but Hideo Kamamoto's book is the one that I first read. And it came out in the late 60s. And he was right about everything. And this is just remarkable because most people who wrote early stuff, turns out about a third of it was wrong.
Yeah.
And thousands and thousands of guitars have been damaged because people took it to be the Bible. But he wrote this incredible book. And maybe because I read that book, I was lucky and started out on that book and saw his sort of scientific method. I sort of got off to a good start, but that whole thing about the truth and there are things you don't know, and there are things that you know are wrong, and then there's the truth. There are these three places in the spectrum, and you got to be able to know what you don't know. You can always make sure you're not wrong. It's really hard to make sure that you're right. You can say, I don't know. But if you say, I'm sure of this, you better be sure.
Yeah.
And you better have a way to prove it. It's much better to be in the, I'm thinking about it, or
in the gray area.
And say, I don't know, because you won't be wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, man, you've definitely garnered the respect of a lot of musicians and guitar players over the years. I'm actually kind of curious. What are some of the best guitars you've ever worked on, or something, holy grails, or something that just stood out that you were, that it was best guitar you ever worked on?
I mean, there's some stunning sounding acoustic guitars. There are a lot of them. I mean, I don't know that there's one, but there's a couple things that are noteworthy. One is guitars that have an iconic sound that people that have made careers, that little Epiphone Olympic that Dave Rawlings has, Gillian Welch and Dave Rawlings. Mm-hmm. He's got this little Epiphone archtop that he found very early on, and we met really early on. And it was missing the bridge, and I sort of sculpted this ebony bridge for it. And that guitar has gone on, and it's an archtop, but it's got almost a resonator sort of sound. And it's gone on to be his trademark sound. Mm-hmm. And he's a great guitar player. And Gillian Welch but they are kind of a writer, because I think they write together. She was the first or the primary writer, or people see her as the writer, but they're truly joined at the hip. And they're my favorites, I think. If you want to ask me who my favorite artists were, maybe you did, that would be right up there, if not. This guitar is absolutely his sound. The other day he found this D28 at Carter Vintage that gave him sort of the same sound. I mean, or gave him the expression that is his expression. And it had belonged to Norman Blake, who was one of the first, most important Nashville-based acoustic guitar players. So now the history means a lot to him. And
Sure.
But a remarkable sounding guitar, just a remarkable guitar. But part of the problem is that there are so many people we deal with who have incredible collections that you get to hear some really remarkable guitars. And in a way, what would knock me on the floor if I was just living in Omaha and somebody said, check this thing out, is almost routine here, because it's in a pantheon of otherwise incredible instruments.
Sure.
And that could be said of the guitar players too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. And earlier on, you're dealing with historic instruments here. I mean, I guess there's a side of you too that you're just kind of like, do you carry insurance because your guy in the shop didn't see the guitar and accidentally sits on it or something? I'd be scared to death that these, historic instruments, something would happen to them. But I guess that's just part of the deal.
Tornadoes is what I worry about.
Oh, just wiping everything out.
We have a vault we put everything in. I mean, it would, and we're next door to the police station, so I don't worry about any of that stuff.
Yeah.
And we're a repair shop, so I would be lying if I told you we haven't messed anything up. The other day I was working on a guitar, and I was taking the bridge off of this electric, and this big chip, it was, it had been put together so fresh that when I realized it was attached, and I came in from all four sides with a razor blade, it still brought up this big chip, and I was like, oh God. But because this is what we do, I called the customer because I believe in telling everybody the truth. I said, listen, man, I knocked a chip out of your guitar. We can make it go away, but I want you to know. And so I kind of made it go away. And then when I was buffing it out, I went through the rest of the finish in this little place. And I took it to Scott, and I said, Scott, save me, or I'm going to jump off the first story and get to my death.
Yeah.
And he made that go away. And I came back, I said, I don't want to know anything about it. It looks beautiful.
Yeah.
I don't want
Let's
to
get
touch
this
it.
guitar out of here.
Yeah.
And I told the customer. But I've had days when we had a 59 Les Paul and a Flying V of Richie Sambora's and his 1960 custom, the Sunburst Tellys, and something like $1 million or $2 million worth of guitars, and we took them out of their regular cases and put them in the worst looking gig bags we had, and put them in a cardboard box and stuck them in the storeroom. So if somebody for some reason managed to break into the vault,
They're not going to pick those
Yeah.
up.
Let's skip that junk.
Yeah.
But it's Tornadoes. It's not the rest of it. We've never lost anything. We've had a few times where people were 100% sure they had brought us a guitar, but because we run shop software, if something comes in, it's checked in, and so if it's not, if it didn't get checked in, it isn't there.
Yeah.
But that's even been incredibly rare. And later they usually call and go, I found that guitar. I hate to say it.
Yeah.
I've loaned people a lot of things. That my favorite Telecaster, which was a 1960 neck and a body I made in the 80s that looked like a early 50s body. I loaned that to somebody. It had to have been somebody prominent. And if I wrote it down, I lost the piece of paper I wrote it down on, and I've never seen that again. I'm sure they didn't steal it. They just forgot where it came from.
Yeah.
So that's happened quite a bit.
Now you were talking about employees. Employees is something that we're into here. We we talk a lot about employees. You've brought up Scott Holyfield, which we know he's an awesome repair guy. Talk about employees, on how you pick employees, how you train employees, how you keep employees.
Well, I pick them. Actually, the people I thought would be the best traditionally haven't worked out that well. The people I've picked because I felt sorry for them or something have turned out to be great. And the people who seem like they can't look you in the eye and can't walk without stumbling, those guys are great too. The sort of socially dysfunctional. I mean, I'm kind of kidding about that. But,
I get it.
But the fact is, it takes a certain frame of mind to be a good employee. Basically, I look for somebody who's honest because I want them to be able to come to me and go, hey, listen, look what I did. Yeah. And that's a huge rule in my shop. I want them to not be so proud that if what they think is the way they learn to do something isn't the way to do it, that they're open to that.
Mm-hmm.
The way I think we keep them, I'm hard on people. I'll walk in and go, what are you doing? Are you an idiot? You know, and what I mean is, let's take a closer look at this.
Yeah.
You know, but I just say what I say. The way I try to make them feel proud of their gigs is that I hook them up with the customer as who they are. This, you know, Chad Garrity does most of the acoustic stuff like neck sets, and he's doing neck sets for some pretty important people on some pretty important guitars. If they bring it in to the shop, I don't sat out there in the thing, okay, I'm going to do this, I'll do the neck set like this, and then take it back to Chad. I go, Chad, come up here and talk to whoever it is. And that gives them a certain
ownership,
a certain ownership of it. And while we don't Facebook our repairs, I do let them go out and, go to whatever seminar or whatever, encourage them to do this, encourage them to go out and talk to other repairmen or customers or whatever, and be somebody. And then then we just try to give them the means to work in a place that a person would want to work. And lastly, I encourage them to develop things and help them market them. And so we make a lot of tools and a lot of things. Scott Holyfield, because we're already talking about it, makes this thing. When you're repairing a crack on an acoustic guitar, and you have to reach into the sound hole, and you're going to place what's called a cleat, which is usually a little diamond-shaped piece of wood. In vintage guitars, people don't use cleats. They just glue it, and they sell it, and they don't worry about the fact that it's going to pop open later, because a lot of the vintage guitars aren't even played by anybody. They're just kept in a case. But in the real world of musicians, if there's a crack, you can glue it, but you need to put something across the crack. So if you have this little diamond that's about the size of a fingernail, and the grain is aligned in a certain way that it has to end up perpendicular to the crack so that it reaches across and ties it. You're going to put glue on the bottom of this little thing. It's 1/8 of an inch thick. It's about the size of your fingertip. You're going to stick your arm in, and then you're going to reach way back, like maybe behind the bridge somewhere, and try to get it on a crack that you can't see from the inside. You can't put a flashlight or a mirror in there anymore, and you probably can't even put a little mini camera in there and see where you are, because you're going to hide it with your hand. And so Scott came up with this thing where he has a holder for that keeps it off of the top. So when he's sliding it along, trying to find its position, the glue is on it, but it's not getting mushed around on the top. It's got a little magnet in it, and he uses magnetic reading film on the outside, so he can look right through the top, see where it is, what direction it's facing, because magnets have a north-south polarity. And then when he's got it just where he wants across the crack, he tips it down and withdraws his finger, and it's exactly where it's supposed to be.
Wow.
And he was whittling the holder out of nylon, and I said, no, let's go get a 3D printer. We got a 3D printer, and we printed a bunch of these things and improved them. And then a couple of years ago, decided to try to get somebody to make it. And Stuart McDonald's been working on it for a while. It should come out here in a few months. And I said, Scott, will you go do the video? And you guys know Scott. He's like, no, man, I ain't doing I'm not going to be in any video. I go, Scott. But he said, and I said, well, they want a story. He goes, well, just tell them I go, no, Scott, it's you. So I try to put that, he's alone in being not wanting to be identified and stuff, but the other guys are like, they're proud of it. And if there's money to be made, it's money. And so those kind of things, you just try to, and I do a lot of other things. I'm in the shop maybe 60% of the time, and then traveling on with PLEK or on other business. And so I'm trying to get these guys to realize that it's going to be their shop. And that they're going to be, that it's up to them. And if they want to be proud and they want to
empower them.
Absolutely.
That it's them. So, so those parts, introduce them to customers, make them responsible for it, give them the opportunity to innovate, and give them the opportunity to have a hand in the direction.
Awesome. How much time do we got?
10 minutes.
10 minutes. Okay, we got 10 minutes, which is not enough time. But Kim, you are also working on software, which we need to bring you back just to do an episode on this because it's amazing stuff. But the Get Suite stuff, can you give us a 10-minute blow through on that?
I can do it in 20 seconds.
Oh,
There you go,
whoa.
man. Then we can just talk guitars.
The PLEK machine was computer-based, so it generated, it had the capacity of generating data. When I first got it, it tracked a PLEK serial number, and that was it. No brand, no model, no customer name, no nothing. And I begged these guys. They're German. They're like, this is not important. It's like, please, data. Because for them, all it was like run a machine. You know?
Yeah.
Data has become king. This was 20 years ago. Once we started to get some data, I realized that we benefited from it because we could look back. We could see, we work for Peter Frampton, for instance, who has his favorite guitars and also a Gibson Peter Frampton model.
Yeah.
And as he'd get a new Gibson Peter Frampton model, he'd go, set it up like my blah, blah, blah. Well, his favorite guitar, which now is kind of the one that came out of that plane crash, the frets were much lower and a little bit wider. You'd never be able to remember that. You'd never be able to measure that. But you can look it up on the PLEK. You can get exactly what the average fret height is or where it is in different parts of the neck and do the same thing. So data is king. My shop was chaos because we have 6, 7 guys working there. We have 5 or 10,000 recurring customers. And we did everything on paper tickets because I'd gotten these things from Corner Music. I used these three paper things we wrote out by hand. You need to look something up from the past. There was no way.
Good luck.
If somebody called up and said, where are you guys on my 335? No chance. It would take every single guy in the shop to figure out who was working on it, where is it drying, is it done? This was crazy. So in about 2008, Bucky Baxter and I started a software company called Moontoast, which was a major Nashville startup that it got diverted. Unfortunately, the investor money kind of pushed it off of what it was. But it was originally a site for experience and expertise. It was live streaming video. If you wanted to know how to repair a Telecaster or build a spring house water pump, which I have on my farm, I could go on there, spend an hour on the computer and teach somebody how to do something, charge them $300 an hour to talk about guitars on the weekend, and $10 an hour to talk about springs or how to smoke salmon or something. So I got into the software thing, and started thinking about you can do something. You can do it. You can live in Nashville, sitting on hay bales or however people think of Nashville, and kind of change the world. We kind of changed the world. We taught Facebook. Moontoast taught Facebook how to do marketing, how to do advertising and stuff. I mean, they kind of took it, but it came from us. Empowered by that, I started thinking about, well, we really need to run some software in the shop. Excel, which I was using, is not doing a very good job. And so we started building something to solve some of the problems. Who, what, when, where, how come, how much, all that stuff, and be able to not only know what's going on today, but what was going on in the past. How do we go back and find that so-and-so's guitar? We've been working on this. Originally, it was a local program that sat on our computers. Now it's web-based. It's in the cloud. We distribute it. We have several dozen customers, big places, little places, one-man shops. It's a totally comprehensive repair shop management that's used by amp shops. In fact, all you do is change the things, but it's preloaded with all the jobs and tasks. You're going to do a neck set. That's the job. What are the tasks? Lift the tongue. Do fret dress. Do whatever. Anybody can set it up any way they want, and then it times all these tasks so that you can look back and see how effective you are. It has inventory in it. It's got the whole bit. We've got a version of it for small builders. We've got a version of it for distributors or commercial non-customer facing companies. Anyway, so we've spent a bunch of time building that. We have something called Get Suite, which is the overall. So that program is called ShopFlow. Get Suite is the umbrella. Within that is ShopFlow, GetWick, which is an online photo repository of guitar details, so that if you're researching something like Rodney Crowell's L00, and it looks like for some reason they painted over the side dots. You can go, well, what color were they? And then you can go hope that there's a picture of an L00 in there, which there is, with these zoomable shots of the side of the neck and the back of the bridge and stuff that Google doesn't have. And you would find that actually Gibson didn't put side dots on an L00 for some reason. So that's what GitWick is. It's built by everybody for everybody, and it's free. Unfortunately, it takes time. You take your cell phone and shoot somewhere between 5 and 50 photos of a guitar, but there's hundreds of guitars in there, and we're hoping that at some point people will put thousands of guitars.
Wow.
Vintage guitars being something made yesterday or before.
Interesting.
We have a vintage registry. Vintage Registry is an online cloud-based appraisal platform, so you can do appraisals with a front and back picture, whatever pictures. You can create a timeline, so you can go over it. You can add things to it. You can go back and say, I was wrong. That's Brazilian rosewood, and it'll update whatever it is, but not erase. You can't erase anything. We have a RFID instrument tracking platform for implanting this RFID tag that's about the size of a piece of rice, and then attaching all of the repair or PLEK or whatever data you want and giving that to the customer so they have one central place. It can be used for anti-theft, but mainly it's just used for looking at your Santa Cruz that's Brazilian rosewood but was made at a time when Brazilian was legal to ship or whatever, and because it's in the cloud, it's time stamped, and all of this stuff is in there immutable. You pass it on to somebody. You can, the fact that you refinished it, you could erase. You could choose not to pass that on, the repair history, but it's one kind of central repository. And there are several other components to GitSuite.
It's like healthcare for guitars.
It's like healthcare for guitars.
Yeah.
But so we build this stuff. I've basically done it myself. I learned the hard way not to take investors because you have to answer to people. So development is slow, but it's what I always wished existed, and so we've been building it and trying to build it as smart as possible.
That's amazing. And what's the website for that?
The photo thing is called GitWick, GITWIK.com.
And what about the other stuff?
Shopflow is shopflow.co.
Okay.
And they can get all to this at getsuite.com.
Yeah,
right?
they can, yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, just go to
getsuite.com, which is pretty extensive website. So, but man, Joe, it's been a pleasure having you in here. I feel
been
like
awesome.
I feel like we're stopping this one.
We're scratching the surface.
We need to pick up part 2 later down the road because I feel like we just got you going.
Well, I'd be happy to do it. It's so interesting, and it's interesting to get to talk about this stuff. And the education element is what I'm most interested in. I mean, that's what the big startup we did 12 years ago was about, and this is what all the rest of this stuff's about. Is how do you make everything available and make it available to everybody.
Well, guys, I guess Ian's looking at me like we literally have like 14 seconds.
We got to wind down.
Joe, please come back. We want to hear more about education and everything else.
We appreciate you
so
coming out. This is a treat for us.
Yeah,
we appreciate
absolutely.
it.
Well,
I can sit and listen
much.
to you for hours. So
We'll do it again.
It's a treat for me. Thanks.
Awesome.
The Music Retail Show.